Interesting developments on the school reopening front. There's been an internal war within the administration between the CDC director and actually the White House. So let's put this up there on the screen. The CDC director came out last week, got herself into a little bit of trouble, saying that it was possible for schools to reopen safely without teacher vaccinations. Now, what's happening, however, is that the White House press secretary and the administration then said that she was speaking in her own internal capacity and that they would release their own guidelines later. So let's play what Press Secretary Jen Psaki had to say when she was confronted by that statement by the CDC director.
I'd like to follow up on the issue of school reopenings. Dr. Walensky had said at a previous briefing there is increasing data to suggest that schools can safely reopen and that they can safely reopen without teachers getting vaccinated. You then said the official CDC guidance is not out yet, but there is some urgency to this because schools are making their decisions right now about how and when to reopen. So does the Biden administration have an assessment today about whether schools can reopen with or without teachers getting vaccinated?
Well, first, the guidance will come officially from the CDC, as Dr. Walensky, who leads the CDC, would certainly convey to you.
So what happened there, Krystal, is that you could see, and this happens a little bit later on and previously, is that they were like, well, the official guidelines are going to come out on Wednesday. And the reason why I think that this all matters is, of course, that there's a big internal war within the administration around school reopening. Biden later came out and said, he's like, I support school reopenings and more. But there's a lot of criticism around here because they're not accepting the CDC statements directly on its face. And it seems that there could be some other internal war within the administration over how exactly schools should be reopened. Their official guidance will come on Wednesday.
Yeah. I think it's a good story to flag
Right.
and keep an eye on, because as we've seen, it's really important that an administration and the public health officials be on the same page. And we were told, follow the science, and that's what we all want to do here.
The science is clear.
But Biden did, a big Super Bowl interview yesterday and got asked about this topic. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I think it's time for schools to reopen safely. You have to have fewer people in the classroom. You have to have ventilation systems that have been reworked. Our CDC commissioner is going to be coming out with science-based judgment within, I think, as early as Wednesday as to lay out what the minimum requirements are.
And look, from my perspective, this is actually the right position because, number one, you can't ignore. It's been devastating for especially our most vulnerable students to be online learning. It's been terrible. I mean, look, I have 2 kids in public schools. They have every advantage you could possibly have, and it's been hard for them. So, people who have less stable circumstances, struggling with internet access, all of those things, it's been a lost year of backsliding for a lot of kids. We've documented here and talked about the mental health issues. So it's a priority to get kids back to school, but you also can't just ignore that there's a pandemic going on. They need funding. They need the ability to implement the type of safety precautions that Biden is talking about here. I also see some narratives forming on the right that I'm very skeptical of. So I see a lot of people who I think are acting in basically bad faith, trying to gin up a campaign against teachers' unions writ large.
You're correct, and they definitely are.
And I saw, Bloomberg comes out and he's making comments. People who've been longtime opponents of public school and teachers' unions are seizing on comments here, comments there to try to make this story about the evil teachers' unions. And I just want to remind people, what we've actually seen over the past few years was a mass movement of teachers in teachers' unions fighting for public schooling and funding for public schools and to make sure that our kids actually get a decent education and don't have super crowded classrooms and all of that. So I just want to remind people it's not that look, there are good and bad actors in any institution you can talk about. You can always seize on one. But I do see that sort of narrative taking shape. And then, the other thing that I would say here is I support the idea that schools should have local control and that in some places, what makes sense is going to be different than in other places, and different communities have to deal with this in a different way. So I don't want to see the federal government taking a super heavy-handed approach here, because I also think it's different. Like, my 7-year-old son is back in school. I think that's good. Little kids don't seem to be spreading this disease very much. My daughter, who's older, she's almost 13, she's not back in school. Maybe that's the right approach for older ages. So I guess what I'm just trying to say here is I think that this is a complicated issue. I'm going to wait and see what the guidelines say on Wednesday. And the most important thing is that there is clear, consistent information being put out and that children's needs are being prioritized over some just like ideologically based political decision, which is what we've been seeing for a long time now.
I'm glad you said that, because this is what's happening, which is that people on the right are reflexively like open schools, right? But well, they don't have a lot of credibility because they've been saying open everything for the last several months.
Right.
And they're actually the people who have in many cases disregarded science and data and all of that for months. On the left, it was actually the same thing, which is that when Trump was like reopen schools, you saw San Francisco and many other places like totally shut down. Became a culture war issue. And at the same time, there are limited instances of teachers unions, I think, acting, in bad faith, at least on this, like in Fairfax and a few other places. But like you said, look, at the end of the day, it is actually a local control issue. And if Fairfax County parents want to go along with that, that's their business, not really ours. On the national level, and I think this is where things actually do need to be important, which is that I was troubled whenever the White House press secretary said that she was speaking in her personal capacity, because that's exactly the type of thing that, if Trump and all the big, Dr. Fauci was speaking as personal, they would have gone all over it. And I think it is important to say, it's like, look, if the CDC director says they can open, then give every school in the country the option, give every school district,
the resources
and just be
that
like,
they need.
Here's what they say, and here's the money. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, that's on you. It's a local thing. So that's why, like you said, are a lot of people that are being like, screw teachers unions. Like, look, the National Teachers Federation is not the same as like some Fairfax, right? So yes, there's a lot of bad faith actors involved here. And I just think at the end of the day, it should stand on its face. If the CDC director says they can reopen, great. I think that's good. And I think the Biden people should cheer that on too.
Yeah,
So you
your point is critical too about okay, here's how we reopen safely. That doesn't just mean uniformly open. It means you have to get people the money to be able to do this in a way that ultimately everybody feels good about.
That's right.
All right, more Rising for you after this.